Lorri, it is such a pleasure to have you here in Philadelphia with us, and to allow people to hear about the story of Cleveland. Um, when I saw the PBS special come out, I was so proud of the work that you were doing,
Thank you.
the work that you champion every day, and that passion and that commitment that you bring to the work. What I also know, it's a short 5-minute, 7-minute clip, that it didn't tell the whole story. And my sense is that we actually have to do better at telling the whole story so that other places who want to replicate what you did in Cleveland understand what it takes. And one of the big pieces of the story that I felt wasn't told is how this work is influenced, affected, the trajectory of the work is shaped by trauma. But I also know you have your own very personal story about that connection. Can you tell us about it?
Absolutely. And thank you for asking me to share, Hedy. Just a little context about the history of how I came to understand the impact of trauma and chronic absenteeism. In 2007, we experienced a shooting. We had a young man who was suspended out of school who needed assistance. He had been referred for intervention, but at the time, our process was very slow. And as a result, the security officer who's normally on duty in the building, which happens to be the building where my office was housed on the first floor, was off. So the substitute security guard let him in. He went upstairs and he shot 4 people before he took his life. But on that very day, I was on the first floor holding an auditory truancy hearing with 32 parents who were truant by law. And so I was reading the Riot Act about how you must get your kids to school, and this is my last ditch effort before I refer you to court. I was being legalistic and not compassionate. I was following the law. At that very moment, I said, it's safer for your child to be in school than to be on the city streets. And that's when we heard the gunfire. Next, SWAT came running through my meeting and said, don't move. That was the day I made a decision to stop. I made a decision that referring cases to court without understanding our families why is irresponsible. And even though the truancy laws in Ohio had not changed, I did not want to be part of the problem. Growing up, my mother always said, if you're not part of the solution, make sure you're not part of the problem. So our work began in Cleveland in 2007. And we began to work with American Institute of Research, David Osha, who you know personally. And we started with hardware, which is our metal detectors and wands. But at the same time, Eric Gordon, who was our chief academic officer, was adamant about having the humanware component, which is the social emotional curriculum, and to assess what scholars need in order to feel connected and belong and acceptable. And because of the work with American Institute of Research, we began to forge ahead with student support teams, which is a rapid response for scholars who are in crisis. Mm-hmm. And if we had that platform in 2007, perhaps we could have avoided the Success Tech shooting. But the beauty of it all is through the student support teams, we decided to take truant families through the student support process and not only limit that process to behavior interventions, which are common for families with IEPs or identified as having special needs. And by including truant families in the process, we sat around together and collectively, collaboratively design intervention strategies to address tardy arrivals, unexcused absence, excused absence. And as you say all the time, Hedy, a stomach ache doesn't necessarily mean that a child is sick, but it could be an early warning indicator that something's wrong.
What I also saw in the work with you all, and even what was in the PBS NewsHour, was that it seemed to me that you were able to transform the way that people understand young people. That transformative moment you had, that blaming kids, taking a legalistic approach, as opposed to seeing their real story, because it's so easy to go into blame, as opposed to find out what happened. So how did Humanware change that in the district? Because it seems to me that unless you can change people from blame to what happened to you, we can't create welcoming and engaging schools where kids want to be.
Right. Because I believe the Humanware process, the SEL strategies and curriculum that we put in place, it also required that we examine ourselves and begin to open our minds to understand that our families have various whys. And certainly our parents want our children to be successful, and they don't intentionally set out for their children to be truant or not in school. But poverty is a full-time job. And so with that comes a burden where our families were making decisions between milk money and bus transportation. Or our families were faced with unsafe housing, falling asleep to gunshots all night, and so you're sleepy. You can sleep better in the morning than you can at night. And so perhaps you don't want to be in school, or if you're in school, you're sleepy and tired. But asking families the why. So part of that mental process for me caused me to suspend judgment. And when I met you and we began to talk about myths and aversions, you really spoke to something that was inside of my gut. And within me, I knew from Success Tech, because all of that was present, that I had to stop being legalistic and judgmental and teach others that we need to understand the why.
You know, it's so interesting because to me, it's a combination of transforming how we understand young people and their families to engage in positive problem solving. But what I also think Cleveland did, it sounds like, is you started, if we think about a public health tiered support system, you had some of the deeper tiers in place through Humanware, but you actually didn't have the tier 1 part of the attendance pieces. And so your numbers were huge, because if you don't have the tier 1 pieces of attendance, even if you have the mindset around it, but you don't have the positive engagement where you're really motivating daily attendance, you have so many kids falling through the cracks and being truant that you can't reduce your numbers. So it seems like then what you were able to do is actually build a tier 1 approach on top of deeper tier 2 or 3. Is that your sense of what happened?
Absolutely, Hedy, you're correct. The tier 1, which is a citywide attendance message, and you know my slogan, get to school, you can make it. But what happened and what's built into that message, it actually informs parents and empowers parents to make good decisions. So we ask in Cleveland that scholars not miss more than 10 days for any reason, and our why is because when we analyzed our data, we had an aha. At 10 days, our third graders are 9% less likely to pass third grade reading guarantee. At 10 days, our students score 12% lower on standard reading tests, 15% lower on standard math, and they're 34% less likely to graduate on time. Now that was Cleveland Metropolitan School District's why, which then we told our parents and shared the why. Then they are informed and empowered to make good decisions over a 10-month school year about out-of-school time. So even in having this citywide tier 1 message, it required that we not preach, that we not judge, that we not penalize or threaten parents, but we began to open conversations and have a dialogue about how can I support you? What's missing?
That is so fabulous. But the other thing that I'm so impressed about in Cleveland, I love you to speak to more, is you not only came up with the message, you came up with a whole slew of messengers from the community. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about it, who's involved, and how that has helped to really create this robust tier 1 in a community that does have community spirit despite so many challenges?
When we first started, Hedy, it was a district charge. We started working with each other. We brought in Burgess and Burgess, which is a marketing strategist organization, an outside organization, to partner with us and help us think about strategies and how to broaden the message, the best way to publicize the message. Once we got started, other people invited or wanted to become part of the attendance campaign. So the Cleveland Browns Give Back, which is their community arm, they financially support our campaign. They provide football players who come and make player visits. They build rocking chairs. They build rocking chairs for our early childhood grades K-3.
Oh, fabulous.
To create reading corners within our schools. They actually make bikes, and so this year we received 200 bikes from the Cleveland Browns Give Back. And those bikes go to scholars who have on-track attendance, which is that 10-day threshold. So, and we stopped rewarding perfect attendance. Now, certainly there's always a place to acknowledge scholars who have impeccable attendance, but you can't grow attendance from perfect. Mm-hmm. What about the scholar who only missed 2 days, 4 days, 5 days? Shouldn't that individual be recognized? Because everyone wants to feel good. And once we lived in the space of being positive and less judgmental, we all became more creative about how we can inspire our families to stay on track and stay in school.
Tell me a little bit, too, about how a phone bank is a part of that Tier 1 strategy. What is that phone bank and who's involved, and how does that help you broaden and deepen the message?
Okay, so when we first started, the phone bank was comprised of executive directors, members of our board, our CEOs, executive cabinet, chiefs, deputy chiefs, executive directors. And we would phone bank in the evening between the hours of 4 and 6 and call families who we considered the bubble family. So we were watching our data was actionable. Mm-hmm. And we would govern the list of families that we select to call based on how we move that target throughout the school year. So it's a progressive measure. So you start out with 2.5 days first quarter, move to 5 days absent for any reason, and closing the year at less than 10. So those are the families we target and really massage the importance of being in school. So at first, again, made up of district employees, at-will employees contributed and staffed the phone bank. And in doing that, Hedy, we learned so much about ourselves. The person who was the director of safety and security, who's responsible for the ID swipes that our high schoolers use to board public transportation, actually called a parent, and the parent shared that the reason that their scholar wasn't in school is because I'm waiting on that swipe access. Mm-hmm. He had an epiphany, and so instead of taking the swipe through the traditional process, delivering the cards to the school, he then was motivated to make sure that the cards get there sooner. So we had some discoveries through talking and speaking with parents that many of our families struggle with clean clothes and uniforms because we are a 100% uniform district. And that's where the Cleveland Browns discovered that we can contribute. We can actually come in as a community partner and provide some dollars so that we can provide a special teams package, which consists of 2 customized uniforms in the scholar size, brand new pack of underwear, socks, a casual change of clothes, some school supplies. And it's so unique. And in this space, we have faith-based leaders who joined the campaign, who actually walk scholars to school to make sure that they're safe in the morning when it's dark. We actually have volunteers from City Year who participate, and they volunteer their time to phone bank after hours. But they also are champions and mentors for our scholars to encourage them to stay in school.
So how do you make sure that when someone's on a phone bank, they know how to engage a family?
Okay, so we provide a script. We don't leave it to chance for everyone to say whatever they think is appropriate. We actually provide a script, we model the script, and we monitor and listen on the phone calls to make sure that the callers are sticking to the script. Then the callers actually measure and document what the parents are saying, what the needs are. We look for gaps, for areas that we can, as a district, bridge gaps and close areas where our families are falling through cracks. Then we pass off the phone bank results to individuals who are assigned to various schools to follow up. And we don't let go of the family until we successfully connect them to the appropriate department.
How do you manage the fact that families they're always changing phone numbers?
Okay.
I hear from districts all the time that, how can I call people? I don't even know if I have got a right phone number.
Well, we don't use just one form of communication. One, we do seek to have phone numbers, and we have an intern that's solely responsible for updating phone contacts. And what that looks like, again, thank you to the Cleveland Browns, that we were able to reward parents for updating their phone contact. We built into our secretarial staff a triage. We trained them to, anytime a parent comes in, it's just like if you go in for your medical checkup, we want to confirm that your contact information is still the same. So, Hedy Chang, is your phone number still 555-555-5555? And is your address blah, blah, blah? So we actually use that same method to make sure that we have accurate contact information, but we got smart. We asked parents for their social media platforms and addresses, because parents may change a cell phone, but you usually don't change your email address. Or if you're available on social media, you don't want to change and lose that history. So we ask them to befriend the district and the attendance campaign. And then that becomes a means by which we can continue to communicate with parents.
So from all this work, Lorri, what have you seen as the results?
What have I seen as a result? When we first started Hedy, and you know, when we first met 3-4 years ago, I think you were devastated by our chronic, just to be kind, you were devastated by our chronic absenteeism data. And so we started out around 44% of the district was chronically absent out of 40,000 students. That's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And since that time, our last state report card, we came in at 30.2%. And I'm anticipating at the close of this school year, opening in the fall, that we're closer to 27%. So we've seen an improvement in the on track, which is the 10-day threshold, which 59% of the district is on track. But we've also experienced a decline in the deeper end absenteeism.
Well, thank you, Lorri. It's such an inspiring story to see what's possible with dedication, with persistence. I know it takes a team, but I also know the passion, the commitment that you personally bring to this work is invaluable.
Thank you, Hedy.